been blessed with many great things in my life, but by far, one of my favorite blessings is being born during one of the greatest times in video game history. I got to experience Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, the original PlayStation. One of my favorite hobbies, even to this day, is visiting some arcades and experience some of the greatest classics that history has to offer. And within many of those video games that I played over those years, a lot of them were some amazing Star Wars games that has bred the individual you are seeing today. But in today's video, we know that Starkiller, famously known from Force Unleashed 1 and 2, is now coming to Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. And the question is, what will be the rest of the requirements for Starkiller? And seeing that Starkiller is going to be in a new type event called a Legacy event, I can't help but think that they require characters celebrating some of the most iconic heroes that we got to play through over the many years of the successful Star Wars games that came to fruition. So people might be asking, what era are we diving into in Star Wars Galaxy Heroes? And from my history and from my perspective, I think we are celebrating some of history's best Star Wars video games. So far, we know that Dash Rendar is the first requirement for Starkiller, which from a lore perspective is next to zero. If you don't know Dash Rendar, he comes from the 1996 Shadows of the Empire video game. And seeing Dash Rendar, that is my first indication that we are celebrating Star Wars video game characters from many different eras. However, I know a lot of people are hoping that we're going to get requirements that are more specific to Starkiller's story from Force Unleashed. And if you don't know who Starkiller is, I'll give you a quick summary to show how important this character is for Star Wars video games. As you guys know, most little happy little fairy tales start off with a hero that might be slightly tempted by the dark side, but ultimately resist its urge. Starkiller is a little bit different. Firstly, he is the apprentice of Darth Vader, of course not canon, and official in the Star Wars universe, but it's fun to imagine Starkiller being trained by Darth Vader himself. And ultimately, Darth Vader screwed over Starkiller when Palpatine ordered Vader to show his loyalty to Palpatine's empire by executing him. From what began as Starkiller fully embracing the dark side from the beginning, over the course of the game, you see him be tempted by the light side. And throughout that course of the journey, going back to the light side after being embraced in the dark side, he comes across many friends, such as Proxy, his sidekick droid, and his love affair, Juno, and then sort of taken under the wing of Ram Kota as an apprentice. Those would probably be a legitimate guess if we are going to get characters that are more in tune with the Starkiller Force Unleashed story with those three right there. However, Dash Rendar is still such an oddity in those requirements and doesn't really make sense, which is why I have a suspicion we might be celebrating some of the best Star Wars characters that existed in many video games. So although I do hope to see some of these other Force Unleashed characters that were important to Starkiller come to the game, I have a suspicion that I might know where we're heading here with the hint of Dash Rendar's presence in Shadow of the Empire, and we already saw an early slight sneak peek teaser of his kit. It seems like they might maybe add powerful, famous main characters from various video games to help certain factions. As we see, Dash Rendar is going to come to the rescue and help out the Solo Prepared Squad, which is one of the most lackluster teams to ever come to Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. And it doesn't seem like Dash Rendar is going to be part of the Starkiller team anytime down the road. In fact, my prediction is Starkiller might actually be a character that doesn't really have a team with the requirements and might just be a character that's going to be very helpful for maybe a Darth Vader team, or maybe even a Lord Vader team, because he could very well have an unaligned Force user tag. So if we're gonna have fun and go with my logic of celebrating the legacy of Star Wars video games, I feel very confident, and I've seen you guys hope and pray it is as well, but I got a suspicion we might see Kyle Katarn as a requirement. And the one thing I want to point out, the only concern I have, is if Kyle Katarn is deserving of a marquee character. Seeing at how many video games Kyle Katarn was in, seems like he might be more suitable for something bigger than a marquee event, but nonetheless, let's assume he's just a marquee status character. So to my knowledge, Kyle Katarn is not canon, but holy cow, was he in a lot of expanded universe things out there. Kyle Katarn might be one of those Star Wars characters that shows up in some of the most video games in Star Wars history. He first makes his debut in Star Wars Dark Forces, and man, did he have quite the journey. Dark Forces was a first-person shooter game that came back in 1995, and originally he was an individual that joined the ranks of the Empire, believing that his family was slain by rebels, which he grew to hate. And during his time in the Empire, he came across a rebel agent which told him the alleged truth about his parents. And apparently, the Empire killed him again. Fake news. And then he was a mercenary who then helped out the rebellion. And then inevitably, in the end, Kyle Katarn turned out to be a Jedi. So I guess you could say that's quite a resume right there. So point being, this is a character that was involved in so many different Star Wars video games out there and had quite an interesting story arc. But nonetheless, I think if we are celebrating legacy Star Wars characters from a variety of video games in the past, I think it would be foolish not to have Kyle Katarn be a part of this story. And kind of like how Rendar has no connection to Starkiller and is allegedly going to be helping out the prepared Han Solo team, Kyle Katarn could do one of many things. As we saw, he was Stormtrooper turned mercenary turned rebel turned Jedi. So there's a lot of stuff out there. He could very well be maybe another rebel fighter of some sort. And my vision for this legacy event for Starkiller is maybe we got to play like a big scene from each of these legacy video games that ultimately leads us to the Force Unleashed video game. Now we got two more characters that we need to discuss, and I'm not gonna lie, this is a lot trickier to think of these type of characters than it is to find characters related to Starkiller, because there are so many great Star Wars video games to pick from. But also when you're looking at these Star Wars video games, you gotta look for a centralized big character like Starkiller, Kyle Katarn, Rendar, the main central focal point of a game. I'm gonna take us to more recent times perhaps, and I'm not sure if these are old enough to be considered an old retro game character, but they are certainly part of legacy Star Wars. And how do we move on to something a bit more recent? And I'm looking at Battlefront 2, the EA one. And then we have Iden Versio. Now, I'll be honest, I wasn't a fan of the Battlefront 2 campaign. When I went to originally see it at EA Play, they said this is going to be a story from the perception of the Empire, the perspective of the Empire. And it was one level, and then she already turned coat. It was a good game nonetheless, but I gotta say, I'm still a little bit heated after playing that game. Kind of like Kyle Katarn in the way she originally was full into the Imperial propaganda, or way of life, I should say, the right way of thinking, and inevitably turned rebellion, which if you kind of ask me, it's kind of a stale plot line at this point, but I digress. And the thing that was really cool about the Battlefront 2 campaign is we really got a glimpse of the Inferno Squad, but more importantly, seeing what was going on after the Death Star 2 had been blown up. My only problem is I feel like Iden Versio is a little bit too new, but let's just kind of look at this legacy lifeline of Star Wars video game characters, and I'm sure 10 plus years down the road, we're going to look back and say, yeah, that was kind of an iconic Star Wars game to play back in the 2010s. And if we're going to follow our theory that they're releasing individual marquees to help a variety of teams out there, obviously she's got the Rebel tag, but I would really actually prefer that we get the Inferno Squad variant of Iden Versio before she turns code on the Empire. But maybe I'm just being a little too hopeful. And then lastly, the fourth requirement that I'm going to have fun predicting here is going to be a lot more recent than Battlefront 2. And again, I've been seeing this comment so much, probably as much as the Kyle Katarn request. And that's Cal Kestis from Fallen Order. Now, unlike Battlefront 2, it rewinds a little bit, and you guys probably know since it's more recent in history. Cal Kestis' story took place after Order 66, and we got to see moments of time, him surviving the actual order being executed the day it was brought onto him, seeing his master slain by clone troopers, and then we see Cal Kestis survive in a galaxy that seemed to have turned its back against the Jedi Order. And then we saw the story of Cal grow from a person who was afraid to someone who was brave and stand up to the Empire and fully embrace who he was as a Jedi. And along the way, a lot of amazing characters came across, such as Merrin. Probably one of the most difficult boss battles I've experienced was him when he had to take on Malicos. And this actually might work out perfectly, just releasing Cal Kestis at this time being, because it seems like it's not 100% confirmed, I believe, from my sources, but it seems like a Fallen Order 2 might be coming from around the corner. And of course, Cal Kestis is primarily a Jedi, so again, we're seeing maybe a marquee character to help out the Jedi faction to some extent. Although, I can tell you this, they don't really need it in Galaxy of Heroes right now. So if we're gonna buy my theory that Galaxy of Heroes is celebrating the legacy or the history of some of the best Star Wars video games of all time with Dash Rendar and maybe Kyle Katarn, Iden Versio, Cal Kestis, which ultimately will lead to Starkiller, one of the more powerful characters we've seen come out of these historical Star Wars video games, I think we're going to be in for quite the journey. And although we might not get more characters from each of these individual video games now, think of it this way. If they at least introduce one character from Fallen Order, one character from Battlefront 2, one character from the variety of games Kyle Katarn was a part of, or one character with Dash Rendar from Shadows of the Empire, it at least leaves the door open that, hey, they might get more characters to support them individually and create a team that's more iconic with the video game they came from. And since we're on the topic of Kyle Katarn, I've been seeing this comment a lot, and I don't know how much confidence I have in it, but I do know this is a fan favorite character a lot of people want to see, and that's Mara Jade. Now, Mara Jade did have some Star Wars video game appearances. Mara Jade had her first appearance not from a video game, unlike all these other guys here, but her first appearance was in a book called Heir to the Empire, written by Timothy Zahn, which, by the way, check out the more recent Thrawn book, which is also written by Timothy Zahn, some of the greatest Star Wars books you could possibly read on the market right now. Mara Jade's more famously known for being the wife of Luke Skywalker, of course, not canon, not official, expanded universe. Nonetheless, a very popular character. I do hope we see her at some point, but I don't know if we're going to be celebrating legacy Star Wars video game main characters. I'm not quite sure if Mara Jade would be there. And she was briefly Kyle Katarn's apprentice, and we have seen her in some other video games, some not received as well. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed we do see Mara Jade at some point, but I don't know if I'm going to put money on her right now. Nonetheless, although it's great to be in the Empire today, I think it's just a good day to kind of celebrate some of the great Star Wars games in the past. But as you guys know, I'm going to pass the ball over to you guys. What are you predicting for the Starkiller requirements? Is it going to be more in tune with the Starkiller characters that he came to know about in Force Unleashed? Or are you buying into the idea that we're going to celebrate some legacy Star Wars video game characters? But I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you're going to hit that like, comment down below, and subscribe. And more importantly, always remember that it's great to be in the Empire today.